Welcome back everyone to another video. In today's video, we're going to be going through one of Magnus Carlsen's most famous game. This is a beautiful game. He played this in 2004 against Sipke Ernst. And at the time, both of these players were international masters, with Sipke and Magnus both now being GMs. Sipke is a Dutch GM, and of course we have Magnus. And at this time, he was only 13, and he went on, of course, to get his Grandmaster title later that year. But this is a beautiful game, and Magnus gets 3 brilliant moves from chess.com, so stick around for those. So we start the game with e4, of course. Sipke responds with a move. c6, we get a Carl d4, d5, and we bring the knight out to c3. So Sipke takes the pawn, Magnus takes back, and Sipke develops the bishop. Magnus decides to bring the knight back to g3, and Sipke responds by sliding his bishop back. So you might think, oh, bring the knight out. Develop with the bishop? No. In this position, you go h4. You hunt the bishop down. You're basically saying, I don't want this bishop. I want a gun. So Sipke responds by making a luft for his bishop so he can slide back. Magnus develops the other knight. And then Sipke brings the knight out to d7. Magnus responds with the move h5. He's hunting down this bishop. He doesn't want this here. So Sipke slides the bishop back. But Magnus says, no, you don't get to keep that bishop. I'm going to play bishop f3. So we get a trade. And next, Sipke plays the move e6. So he wants to get his bishop out. He wants to bring his knights. And Magnus develops his bishop. He's centralizing all his pieces. His goal is to castle queenside. He brought all his pieces out. He doesn't want to castle kingside because that's where his attack was with this pawn. And you'll notice that this pawn later becomes a very key part of the attack. Sipke responds by developing his knight. Magnus castles queenside. And Sipke parks his bishop on e7. So now, what happens next? We're into the middle game. We're out of the opening. Magnus centralizes his knight. He's saying, I'm okay with this trade if you take, and my goal is basically going to take if you don't. Sipke responds by attacking this pawn on a2 with his queen. And you'll notice that later in the game, this is a key part of the game with the fact that the queen is on a5. This is a key part. Magnus slides his king back. He doesn't want to lose his pawn and get infiltrated with the queen. Sipke responds by castling, and Magnus takes the knight. That was his goal. He's going to take the knight. He doesn't want that knight there. And, of course, Sipke takes back. Magnus is centralizing his knight. It's a very strong square. He's controlling a lot of spaces. And Sipke's knight is kind of weak. It doesn't control many spaces of its own. So Sipke responds by centralizing his rook. He's attacking this pawn. He wants to infiltrate. He wants to, at some point, do this. He wants this open file. Magnus responds by unpinning his queen. He slides the queen to e2. Sipke is attacking the central pawn. He wants to open his queen. He wants to open the rooks, and he wants to start an attack down here on the queen side. Magnus responds with the first brilliant move, knight g6. He sacrifices the full knight, and you can't take, and that is a losing position for black. But in this position, Sipke takes the knight, and Magnus responds with check. He takes the pawn with check. King slides over, and this hero pawn on h5 takes the pawn on the g file and locks the king in jail, basically. You might be saying, what can Magnus do now? There's nothing else. The king's locked in, but he's safe. Like, there's no attack. So Sipke slides the knight back, and Magnus does the second brilliant move. Bishop takes h6. He sacrifices a full bishop after sacrificing a full knight already. And you might think, oh, you can just take. Everything's already protected. There's no infiltration. There's nothing. So Sipke takes. But here, Magnus plays the third brilliant move in a row. Rook takes h6. He sacrifices a full rook. You might be thinking, what? He can just take. That's just a clean sacrifice. There's no attack. So he does. He takes the rook. Magnus takes the bishop, though. And Sipke responds by blocking it with his knight. You might be thinking here, oh, you can play rook h1, you get an attack here. But it's actually not the best computer move. The best computer move is to take the knight in between. And so Sipke is getting scared. He moves his king out of the corner. He doesn't want to get trapped in the corner and get checkmated. But Magnus responds by sliding his rook up. And you'll notice that the queen here is controlling this square. And so Magnus has full control over this queen that's sitting here doing nothing. It had no part in the attack. It was sitting there the whole time looking at this a2 pawn, but it wasn't here to help defend this attack that Magnus had after sacrificing 3 full pieces of his own. And it still can't infiltrate. So Magnus plays rook d3. He's trying to get his rook in. He's moving it over here. Sipke responds by trying to defend. And you'll notice that this is a free rook, but it's not actually a free rook because if you take, it's checkmate here along the back rank. So you can't take. So Magnus gives a check on g3 with his rook. Sipke blocks. Magnus gives another check. Sipka takes the pawn. Magnus continues giving checks. He gives a check here on f5. And in this position, it's very losing for black. It's probably force mate at some point. Like, he can run over here, he can hide, but it is a very bad position. Like, at some point, he's going to take this rook, he's going to take this rook, and it's going to be totally lost. But in this position, Ernst saw the young Magnus Carlsen, and he decided to go the easy way out. He blocked with his rook. And if you can't find it, try to find it now. This is a mate. It's a force mate in one move. Magnus Carlsen plays the move Queen d7, checkmate. The king blocked in by his own rooks. Both files totally cut off. And that is a beautiful game of chess. He had 3 brilliant moves, 3 full sacrifices, and still mated the king in between his own pieces, cut off, choked to death by his own rooks. And that is a beautiful game of chess by Magnus Carlsen. I hope you enjoyed. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed that video, and I'll see you in the next one.